Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And today, we're going to spend a little bit of time on a topic that I have seen coming up more and more sort of tangentially when on YouTube. I've seen a lot of video recommendations of people asking the question of, why don't I enjoy video games the way that I used to? Like, why don't I remember video games the way that I used to? Why don't they have the same love that they used to for me? And what to do about it and how to try to fix that problem and reconnect with them. And as John and I were talking about it, I think maybe our odd little hobby of wargaming could help be that answer. Yep. And I think it's worth talking about if wargames could maybe make you love video games more, or maybe again.
And I mean, we're not just talking out of anything with this. Like, we're also, this worked for us. This helped us enjoy video games more.
Yeah.
So, it's from
maybe help you? Possibly.
Maybe.
If nothing else, you're going to listen to us ramble a little bit. So, like, you get that and it fills in your background. But hopefully it helps somebody out there. However, before we do that, we got to talk about hobby time. Games played. Play the music. All right, John. What you been up
to? You don't even know. You're not even aware of what I've done. What I have accomplished in this time frame.
Are you making an admission? Like what? You probably shouldn't put it on the internet, whatever that is.
So I have finally come back with a vengeance after getting a lot of stuff unpacked in my house, and also dealing with everything that comes from dealing with everything I've dealt with in the last 3 months. I've slowly been able to work on more hobby, and it's good because I just got more stuff coming onto my plate. But I've been able to build all of the Skaven I need for the Joe HammerCon molder list that I'm running, like the Brood Horror, the Brood Terror, the Brood Terror, all the Rat Ogres, all like the like the Grey Seers, the Engineers, yeah. I'm also working on building all the Scryer bits for the Scryer list I'm building for our friend Brian to play, because we're going to have the tale of 3 different Skaven warlords at our next Joe HammerCon AOS time, where we're all going to be conniving and screaming at each other in little rat voices. It'll be great. So I've been just building like a madman for Age of Sigmar. Getting all of that stuff ready, getting all of it just done and prepared. Meanwhile, I also have been painting up on my Necromunda gang here and there, just sort of like working on it when I have some time. Got some work done. Having a good time. I've done a ton of work on getting new stuff for the winter, because we are going to be getting into Infinity. So we're splitting the Operation Sand Trap box. So I'm getting ready to get into Pan-Oceania, good old Kestrel Colonial Force, and also Conquest is going to be huge for us for the next 3 months. And because
Good Lord, that's the truth.
I got the rest of what I need except for one model from the Wadroon line. So the only thing I don't have in Wadroon now is the Thunder Chieftain, which I'm going to probably get in the future at some point. But I'm going to be building the rest of, building out the rest of its, extra stands for some of the units I already have. Building out extra, units of, Raptor Riders. I'm going to build the Thunder Riders. I'm going to have some stuff. And on top of all of that, we've been sort of organizing the new Escalation League for Conquest that we're going to be doing at our shop. That's got quite a bit of players in it already. Pretty great. If you're interested, look at Tactical Retreat Gaming. If you're in the Cincinnati area.
Shameless plug.
We are doing an Escalation League. We're starting at 800 points and sort of going up every once in a while for Conquest. And so scheduling and organizing and getting that ready. Picking up dates, sort of figuring out what we're doing for prize support. Trying to make this a fun experience for people and a community building style of event for the next 4 months, and not just big tournament. which that has its own challenges, but this is a very specific kind of challenge. I think we're pushing ever closer to 20 players, which is quite interesting.
I did not expect nearly that number. It's a great surprise. It's just
almost doubling what we had last year, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's nice to see the game getting some momentum locally. Truly, I thought maybe we'd get like a dozen people, 14 maybe. So to already be at almost 20 is just incredible. Looking forward to that. For me, I was out of town for about a week and really puts a hamper on the hobby progress, but there has been hobby progress. I got Belthanos built because recently the Sylvaneth rules changes came out, and I think now that army functions. And now that it functions, I want to test it out. And got a Belthanos and didn't even cut him off the sprue or anything yet, so just built him up so I could get him ready to play. Also got most of Usharan built up just to get ready for another, like, essentially prepping my potential armies for our November Joe HammerCon. I'd never put together Usharan, and I ended up being the odd man out and coaching through, like, games of AOS for some people. So started putting him together. Feels really nice. Outside of that, I've also done some prep to, like, glue magnets on the bottom of some miniatures for Conquest to be able to take them to game at the shop. And then I've also been playing some games. John and I got some games of Age of Sigmar in to test out armies ahead of Joe HammerCon and just get the lay of the land a little bit better, test out some different rules builds. And also got to play some Conquest against our editor Seth, where we got to put some Dwagum against some Sorcerer Kings, which I badly need more experience with. I do not understand Sorcerer Kings still. It seems to be sit back as far as possible, do spells that do middling stuff, and then conflagrate, triple activate a whole bunch, see if you win. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are other rituals, but I can't name them. It's only conflagrate. So I'm starting to get my head around the current setup of the army. It's just, I need more experience. But that was a really good time to figure out how all of those auras interact.
Yeah, playing games has become such a integral part of my weekly routine at this point that I sometimes forget the notable things that I'm doing. Because we've been playing more frequently now that I live like 10 minutes from Joe. So we play basically every Wednesday, and then we also sometimes play on the weekends. So we are getting in a lot of game constantly. More game than ever before.
I love this. It's delightful.
It makes it much easier to play a bunch of different factions.
Yes. It also, I feel like, makes it easier for me to do show content or to, like, try to have decent opinions now that we're just playing more games, get more experience.
But don't get us wrong, sometimes we don't actually finish those games. Sometimes we get 2 rounds in because we spent 3 hours talking with people at the shop. Because,
what am I going to do? Not shoot the shit, John? Like, what? No, I know. I have to. I am morally obligated to shoot the shit.
Clearly.
It's a Kentucky racial trait. Like, sorry, I can't help it. If people want to have chats, we're going to chat, okay? And I'm sorry if it's going to make my shooting face take 18 years, but we're going to do what we got to do.
It's fine. I'll just go get a drink. We'll be all right.
And I do find that enjoyable. But I do, like, we always talk about, like, hobby time, games played, so I got to mention games played. So there are games happening, which feels nice.
It's just most of the time it's going to be us saying the same game.
Basically. But yeah, now I'm sort of just looking down the barrel, as always happens, of like, hey, summer's done, we're moving into autumn and winter, and that just means my hobby time goes up. It always happens. I'm with the seasons.
The temperature drops. Outside, the hobby increases.
It is true. It is true. Now that summer is done, the schedule is alleviating some. Hobby time skyrockets. And I love that for me. And it really goes high in winter when, like, there's nothing that people want to do outside with me, as opposed to, like, autumn where there's fun outside activities. Like, people don't want to fish in winter. People don't want to go to, like, outdoor festivals in winter. People don't want to go to pumpkin patches in winter. I mean, it'd be a really boring pumpkin patch. So it's just, I'm ready for the boom. It's going to be delightful. Really, the thing I'm avoiding is having to make a firm decision for Joe HammerCon. of what army I'm going to play. But that's fine. It's fine.
You'll pick it this week, I think. I think this week will be the week you pick it.
I don't know about that there, Seabiscuit, but I like how hopeful you are. Put that on an autobiography. But I do think part of why I haven't been getting a lot of hobby in is because I've been playing that there Space Marine 2 video game. And it taking up more of my time. But boy, have I loved it. And I do think the time away from video games has kind of helped. Let's talk about that. This is a weird thing to try to talk about. It is a thing like I feel like we just kind of have to talk about from first person perspective because I don't know if we're way out in left field here.
Yeah, like I don't know. I guess for me, I'll start this briefly with sort of talking where I was at with video games for the last like 3 years. Like during COVID in like 2020, there was so much time for video games and nothing else. Like you could just like you watch TV, you can watch movies, and you can play video games. There's like the three things you can do. Everything else, nothing. And so I spent so much time playing video games. And they weren't even necessarily like single player games. They were just sort of games you could play in the background or while watching something or something like that, right? Just sort of like cozy-ish games. And I think I got burned myself out a little bit on that after playing for a while. And then I tried to come back to it after like things started about opening me up. We started doing more social stuff. We started playing more games in person, doing board games, tabletop RPGs, going back to LARP, doing like Wargames, all that sort of stuff. And then I tried to go back to single player games because like, I really love stories. I love stories and like a good single player game experience. And I would go back to a game and I would go, wow, I really like this. And then like not go back to it after that day. Mm-hmm. Like I'd play it for like an hour and then the next day would come around and I would have an hour and I just wouldn't choose that, right? I just wouldn't keep going back to play video games. I just did not do it. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, why am I doing this, right? Like, I used to love playing video games. I used to play video games for days at a time. I would go to like a Blockbuster, I would rent a game, I would play that game into oblivion, right? I would save a bunch of money to buy a specific video game and like play that video game for like 6 months, even beating it repetitively, just because I had it and it was fun and I liked it, like it was interesting. Where did that joy and that motivation go to? Why, in like my older age, am I like, unable to play video games? And sure, there's always the excuse that everyone has, which is like, I'm busier, I've got more responsibilities, I've got yada yada yada. But you can always.
Like, true, I guess. I feel that.
It is true.
Fair.
You can't just, dump 40 hours into a video game in 2 weeks anymore. But, like, you can still play some video game. Like, you can play, like, an hour here, an hour there. Like, it's doable. And if the question for me became, why is that not enjoyable? Like, it's not that I feel like I'm not getting to do it enough, and therefore I can't enjoy it. It's, even when I do it, I'm like, why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. And for me, a person who plays a lot of other games and other things, I would like started diving into how do I approach, like, why do I not have this same problem with other more physical analog style games? And that's how we led to this topic.
Mm-hmm. For me, I find it's fairly similar, but a little different. Like, during COVID, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of video games, because there was nothing else to do, and it was just so massively, overwhelmingly, apathetically sad. So, like, it was video games or movies and TV, and I did all three to try to, like, get a little variety in a time in which there was no variety to be had in anyone's life. Like, I would get done with work at home remote on the left side of the couch, and I'd close my laptop and then move to the cushion on the right side of the couch, because that's the leisure couch cushion. That's not for business. That's for personal.
The leisure
time.
Cushion.
Yes. It, like, I laugh now, but like, God, that's sad. But couldn't go anywhere. So I did. I played a lot of video games. And I would say, like, I didn't enjoy them at all, but I noticed I wasn't tuned in, if that makes sense. Like, I'd be playing a game, and I wouldn't actually be like paying attention to what I'm doing on the screen. I'm just like knocking out the daily tasks almost. Like, I gotta go clear this radio tower thing. Okay, I'll go do that. I gotta go clear this enemy base on a map. Okay, I've done that. Okay, I'll go gather these supplies. Okay, I did that.
It's like checking your email, but it's got like fancy images on it, and like sometimes you get a reload animation. You're like,
right,
what?
right.
Huh.
And like I would just put stuff on second monitor to like, so I'm playing video game, but I'm not paying attention to the video game. I'm actually like looking over here. So like, what the hell am I doing? And I would get to the end of games I had played for quite a bit, and I wouldn't remember hardly anything I had done. And that became sort of like a pattern. And then COVID ended, obviously sprinted back outside, try to do as much as I can in person with people. Even now, I want to see people together. I want to get people together for any reason I could possibly do, just to like keep people connected. And I've noticed that like, it's not nearly as bad as it was during COVID, but even after COVID, I was struggling to like pay attention to the games I was playing. Even decent games that I would say are good, I would struggle to stay tuned into them.
Yeah, like an example I have is like Red Dead Redemption 2 is a great video game.
One of my favorites of all time.
Beautiful. I keep picking that video game up and just going, this is everything I should love. And I play like 2 hours and then I just put it down, and then a day or two goes by, and I look at it in my Steam library and just don't touch it.
Like, it's a thing. Like, I'm not tuned in. I wasn't like paying attention, so I'm definitely not retaining stuff. So I'm not really deeply enjoying even good stories. And every now and then, games were good enough that they would like shake me out of this, and like I would really enjoy myself, and then realize what was happening. But it was really hard to sort of get my head around it. And as I mentioned earlier, like there are YouTube videos of people who obviously feel this same thing, where they're maybe like the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts are a little different, but they are feeling the same realizations of, man, I am not connecting with this thing I love the way I used to.
Mm-hmm. And like the question isn't, is this thing worth my time? It's like, no, like I want to love this. I'll enjoy this thing. Why do I not feel that enjoyment?
Yes. I want to be enamored with it. I want to be enthralled. What can I do? Like, is there something I can do? And that's a difficult question, because obviously each person is wired differently. Every person's situation and context, his life, is just going to be a little different. And I do believe there is stuff that can be done by everyone to try to fix this, but I don't know if there's one size fits all solutions. But one of the things, at least, that helped me is the less I played video games as my sole outlet for enjoyment, the more I slowed stuff down in other places, the more I could enjoy them when I did boot them up. And Wargames is a large part of that for me. And maybe it could be part of that for y'all out there listening. And I do think there's logic to back that up. Yeah. But to do that, I think we kind of got to break down what makes them different.
And also, we have to say about how they are similar, right? And I think, like, to start off, like, and the similarities are pretty evident, so we're not going to touch too heavily on it. We are going to talk about two things. And one, war games are essentially video games' grandpa.
I mean, that's true.
War games came out and, like, started gaining popularity in, like, Prussia in, like, the 19th century, right? Like, it's one of the different sorts of play or games that led to things like Dungeons & Dragons, and then also led to video games like RPGs. Even shooters are all sort of a simulation of things from this. Storytelling also came from like D&D and just all sorts of different stories and stuff that became games and yada yada yada. So like, in a way, connecting with war games more shows you like a more ancestral or older, more traditional look of what like a game or a play is. Much like when you play chess and then you go play like Final Fantasy Tactics. You can see the similarities and where one eventually led to the other, and it gives you a deeper appreciation. And then the other thing is that, at least in the modern day, many of the IPs of war games have video games attached to them, or at least they have similar themes, right? Like, we play a lot of fantasy war games. There's a shit ton of fantasy video games.
Take your pick of Final Fantasies or, literally Total War Warhammers came to head. But Baldur's Gate,
Space
another
Marine
one that's
2.
just colossal.
Like we play all these games and they have connection points there, right? So that allows you to do another thing, which is sort of like catch where your interests overlap in different mediums. But beyond that, how are they different? And why is that different? Why does that difference really matter, right?
Yeah, I think for me, the first one that strikes me, at least compared to an overwhelming number of games I have played, war games generally are much slower. Because they kind of have to be. A video game could be really fast-paced and twitch shootery because there's a computer doing a lot of back-end work for you. So you can make like quick snap-second decisions, and all the rule stuff is in the background, and everything just sort of works. And it can lead to these like really frantic, frenetic, uber-fast pace situations. And action games lean into that, and it's really cool. It's great. But war games, you cannot do that same thing. Even at its fastest, war games are slow. And I think that is just a restriction of the medium, but also is part of the appeal in that, it isn't, hey, let's get in and do like 19 games of Titanfall 2 in like a little night. Instead, we're going to get together, let's do one game of Warhammer 40K.
Yeah. And also, like, another difference, right, to add to that compounding on top of it, it requires that you take time away from screens. I don't know, I'm going to sound like a boomer with this. Like, I'm going to sound like an old man.
Oh, God, Papaw, here we go.
But we all of us, no matter what job you have, probably have to spend time on a screen at some point. Checking email, playing around with Excel, whatever it is. You have to do stuff on a computer, generally. You also have a phone, and you're going to be looking at that phone all the time. Whether that's good or bad, it's just a thing. You have televisions, you're going to watch television a lot. We have infotainment systems in modern cars that are screens that beam us information while we're driving. Like, there is a lot of information coming at us constantly from the screens, telling us to think about 1,000 different things all at once. This hobby in this game demands that you stop doing that for the most part. When you go to paint a miniature, you have to focus on painting that miniature. You might be able to listen to something in the background or like watch something in the background, but you're still focusing on painting that miniature or building that miniature. When you go to read rules, you have to understand and read those rules. You have to find a way to comprehend those rules. You have to like absorb that information. When you are doing the actual game itself, you might use a screen to get your rules, but you are mostly dealing with a thing physically in a space that you are manipulating with your own like meat suit, for lack of a better way of putting it.
You have to put the miniatures out on a table. That table is 6 foot by 4 foot. You have to have the tape measure. You're moving stuff around. You're putting down the little terrain pieces. You're kind of getting down to eye level to see what's in line of sight to your guys. Yeah, it is just a tangible experience the whole way around.
And one of the ways this is most representative is if you use Steam, you know what I'm going to talk about. Every time you go to load up a game, it'll tell you how many hours you've put into that game, right? Every time you sit down to paint a miniature, build a miniature, or play a game of Warhammer, you don't know. Unless you choose to meticulously track every amount of time you spend on it, you don't know how much time you've spent on it at all. And so you don't make any preconceived notions about your relationship to the thing based off of the amount of time you've spent on it.
Yeah, it does sort of detach you from like how many hours to beat and those sort of discussions, because all of it is so variable that like, I don't know, man, like you could paint it and you could paint your whole army in a day, or it could take you years and dozens or hundreds of hours. Like I don't know, how do you like painting them?
And it requires your investment in order to do. So it requires time and emotional investment. And I'm not saying video games don't to some degree, but I think there's a lot of video games that you just don't, right? Like, There's a lot of video games you can pick up, play a couple rounds of, and throw away, and come back like 6 months later and be fine, right?
Some of them, that's what I love about them. MechWarrior Online, great example.
But
that you pick it up, put it down.
Wargames, they require that you take the time to do a bunch of things. It requires you invest. Namely, and this is also a key point that I think should have its own little small discussion here, is that it requires you to read and comprehend the rules yourself. It requires you to not just go, I sign up to play. It requires you to read how the rules work. It requires you to watch a video of how the rules work. It requires you to ask somebody how to play the game. It requires you to have to learn a thing. A rule set, a design language, all of that. Not just, I loaded up Call of Duty, and I'm going to go play Warzone, and I can learn where the map stuff is while I'm playing the game, but you don't understand the math or the understanding of how the damage is calculated from one gun to the other gun, or why one person dies and one other person dies, right? You learn intricately how game work.
You have to for a war game, because there's no computer. There can't be.
Yeah, you are the computer. Like, you are the one doing the computing about, like...
You're adjudicating every bit of this. You have to adjudicate the moves. You have to physically move every little piece around. You have to decide if there's line of sight. You have to decide if the cover works, and if so, how. You have to decide when to use your rules and roll dice, when you have rerolls, where your auras are. Like, you have to decide what your list building restrictions are, because there's no computer to do it. It's you.
Yep.
And that can be a hurdle. Very fair. But I do think it is one of the distinct differences, and it's sometimes one of the appeals. Because at least now you have to look under the hood of the car, so to speak. You don't have a choice.
And then the final thing that, like, this is not the only thing that makes it different, but this is the last one we're going to talk about, and that is, it is a much more social experience to play a war game than it is to play a video game. And I know that you're going to say, but we got Call of Duty lobbies. Yeah, we also had Halo 2 and Halo 3 lobbies where we screamed at each other and said slurs. Like, that's a thing. I know you all did that. I was a teenager in the early 2000s. I don't think that was actually all that social. We were just hollering at each other behind a keyboard, right? We'd already do that on social media. We still do, like, now it's gotten even worse in a lot of these instances. Most people who interact with video games do so over Discord, right? With people they already know, they've already created relationships with. So they're already talking to people in Discord while playing the game. And that can be enjoyable, that can be good, but I wouldn't call that like a social gathering. I think that a playing war games, particularly in a shop or with a group that you have to go out and meet people in order to do, requires you to gain some of those social skills back and utilize social stuff. And also, it requires you to be able to talk to a person and look them in the face while you're talking to them. And so, like, that means you have to have a baseline respect for one another. I've played tons of video games, and there's lots of people in there who have no baseline respect for anyone in that lobby. As far as they're concerned, the other people in there aren't human beings sometimes. We've had games...
Just NPCs.
Yeah, we've had games of MechWarrior where people are just screaming about a guy who left D. Like...
Get on the point! Oh, God.
You don't experience that in real life most of the time. In these games.
I hope you don't experience that in real life.
Like, in most of my experiences in, like, wargaming clubs have been, like, talking with people from different backgrounds and just hanging out with them, right? It's a third place, right? Just hanging out with them, playing a game, we all have a similar interest, and we're, like, it's within the social contract to sort of, like, be respectable to one another and to not scream at one another. Like, we might have a spirited conversation. The amount of times Joe has told me that he would, like, choke my chicken because I stealed his fish? Like, very loudly in a store has been more than once, which, isn't a lot, but it's weird it's happened more than once.
Even weirder, it was considered endearing and not odd. I'm very confused.
And so, like, that's not the same, right? And I think a lot of people felt that magic early on when playing video games of like, oh, this is like social, like all the social stuff I do out in real life, but I'm doing it in a game. I don't know if that's the case anymore for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think there's something, like, being in Discord is really helpful, but I think there's something to be said for not being able to just click Find Match as a button when you want to play. If you want to play League of Legends, you just click Find ranked match, play. Find me a match, and it will find you one. For wargaming, you do have to inherently go where the people are. Be like, hey, y'all, anybody available? Like, I'm looking to play a game. I want to play this game. I want to play at this point level. Like, here's my schedule. Anybody got time for that? And someone will probably respond with like, oh, I might be able to do that. What are you thinking? And then you kind of got to like, not negotiate, but like work your way through this to see if you're both sort of like vibing together, set up a time, meet, and then you're going to hang out with that person for probably 3 or 4 hours. And that could be daunting if you're not sort of used to flexing the social muscles. I get that. That's totally fair. But I think there is something to be said for the reward you feel in the back end when you have a good time with this person and then maybe make a new friend.
Yeah. I mean,
and if you do it a couple of times, you might make a bunch of new friends.
And you used to experience some of that in video games, right? But a lot of that's gone away because of things like find match button. I'll use an example. I used to play a ton of World of Warcraft. I mean, a ton of World of Warcraft. And you used to not be able to just go click, I want to find a dungeon. You used to have to meet people in like the capital cities and talk to them and say, I'm a tank, here's my, like let's meet. And you would meet the person, they'd look at your gear and go, yeah, you could probably tank Shadowfang Keep. Or whatever, are you a paladin on your paladin quest to go get the little bar things to make your cool little mace? Yeah, sure, you can come tank this dungeon for us. We just need to go find a healer and DPS. And a lot of people look back on that and go, wow, that was a lot of work to get that done. I could have done like 6 dungeons in that time frame. Yeah. But I remember that. I don't...
Papa Orc over here insisting we return to no matchmake lobby.
But, like, it's true.
It's shouting at Orgrimmar.
I don't really remember power leveling my Death Knight through all of the dungeons I did for leveling dungeons. Because most of them are no longer interesting. Because I just... The people who join are effectively or just randos who don't really talk most of the time. They're doing the same thing that I'm there to do. And we weren't forced to communicate in order to do the activity. I'm not saying that game needs to necessarily change, but I'm saying that like maybe that's a thing that you too enjoyed, right? You might be a person who enjoyed that sort of interaction, and you're not going to be getting that from that game anymore. And so now that game is a different thing than what you originally enjoyed. And so maybe you need to go find that sort of interaction in another place.
Yeah, and I think that starts to get into the reasons why I think, like, not only are they intricately connected due to history, because that's just true, from, like, Reekspiel all the way up, but, like, I think many of the things that make video games enjoyable, you can sort of, when you take a step back to look at video games, Papaw, like, you can see more of what's happening in them and appreciate them more deeply, and maybe have more headspace to devote to them. Simply because they are tied. For example, like, if you pump the brakes and you go play a war game and you find that maybe when you try to play like a sci-fi war game, you go out there and it doesn't really work for you. It doesn't click. You don't find yourself drawn to the paint table to paint them a bunch. You don't really find yourself wanting to build. Even when you play, you're like, yeah, it's okay, but it's not really hitting for you. And then you decide to try a fantasy war game. Maybe you try to pop over to Death Wizards or something, and you try to play a fantasy war game, and all of a sudden, like, it's like a light switch comes on. You're ready to paint the miniatures. You're ready to build. You're thinking about maybe looking up what kit bashing is. How does that work? You're trying to get some games in. You're looking for multiple opponents. You're building a little, maybe even like a little weekly or bi-weekly gaming group to play this fantasy game. I think in that moment, you likely will have a realization of, oh crap, maybe I'm just like I'm a fantasy girly, as the TikToks would say. Like, I just really love fantasy. Maybe that's a theme that I have always been drawn to that I just never realized because I was sort of just, doing the routine.
Yeah, I mean, it's really...
And when you go back to video games, maybe then you go find a fantasy game and just immerse in it.
Yeah, it's really easy to get trapped in sort of the hype cycle of this is the new game this month that everyone's talking about, and I'm going to go play it. And it might not exactly align with your interests, but everyone else is talking about how good it is. And it's just good enough to get you to keep playing it. And so you play it, and you're like, oh, it was okay. I don't know why everyone's like freaking out about it. I think it was kind of a waste of my time. And then you feel bad, and that compounds into the next game. Whereas, I suppose, if you have a more secure understanding of your interests, of like what interests you and what doesn't interest you, you can then make informed decisions about the games that you're playing. And then you feel better about the game that you have played in a way that is more purposeful and less influenced by forces sort of outside your control, beaming into your brain that you should play, like, I don't know, Space Marine 2 or Helldivers 2 because you love teamwork shooters. And you're like, I mean, yeah, I kind of do, but like, maybe not me. I love both those things, but like, not everyone does.
Yeah, I think having a time away it could help you realize what is your thing. And I think that could maybe help you just pick your time better when you do go back to playing games. And that's helpful for everybody, especially in a world where you don't have a lot of free time, probably.
And to talk about time, I think we touched on it earlier, and I really want to like hammer it home here. There's a problem I had, and I think other people might have the same problem, in that I would justify my purchases for video games based off of how many hours of enjoyment I could possibly get from it. So like things like World of Warcraft was really bad for this for me, right? I paid like a subscription, $15 a month or whatever. I bought an expansion for like $40 to $60 once a year, or like every other year, whatever it was. And I would play that for a long time every week. And I now have to have all that enjoyment come from that game because I'm paying a subscription service. I bought the thing. I have justified it. I have to see how many hours I can get out of it to squeeze it for all of its value, right? I'm sitting here trying to be like, yes, I've gotten my money's worth from this game. But I think having that subconscious transaction in my head ruined it for me in a lot of ways. It ruins the magic, right? Sometimes you can play a video game for 4 hours. It doesn't matter how much you paid for it, right? Those 4 hours were amazing, right? An example, we play Return to Moria. It's a Lord of the Rings game. We play it like it's a little fun activity where we're all going to get together and we're all going to go, the children crave the mines. And we're going to dig into the tunnels and we're going to get the stuff and we're going to take it back and build a little base, right? It's enrichment.
It's great.
We haven't put that many hours into it. Like, we sit down and play that game every couple of weeks for like 2 hours.
Sometimes, first night I think we played like 5. We were really off the chain.
And I honestly don't remember how much I paid for that game, and I don't care. I've made my money's worth already because I already had a good time. Even if just one night of good time with your friends from a video game, it's like a $20 or $40 video game. That's worth it most of the time, regardless of this time investment thing. But I didn't get there because I just decided that one day. I got there because I played all these in-person games. Got more into Wargaming after COVID again. I got back into tabletop RPGs, got back into LARP, things like that, in which I don't get to see that number of how much time I'm spending on the game. It doesn't exist. It doesn't show me. I don't track that. And so I no longer have to even think about that transaction in my head. I just get to ask myself the question, am I enjoying what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm. Which I think is a fundamentally different perspective. Mm-hmm. That's worth having. It's worth questioning in yourself. I get needing to make every dollar go as far as you can, but maybe you could get more fun per dollar by not stressing so much.
Yeah, and there's the other part of video games, which is video games can be hard. Right? And I think the vast majority of us, even as children, liked video games that were challenging because it was like, I gotta try to do this thing. When you're older and you've put all this time, I have to enjoy every bit of my time that I'm doing with these video games, right? All of it has to be enjoyment. None of it can be None of it can be wasted. It becomes difficult to play those games. And to justify playing those games that are difficult and that you're not innately good at, or that will have a steep learning curve, like things like an Elden Ring, or like a Armored Core, or like a
Hunt
Showdown, right? For me, the way I overcome that was that I learned all the rules to war games and like tabletop RPGs and all of this stuff, which has almost direct design comparisons to video games, so that I could understand the systems being put in front of me when I play these video games, and that made me better at playing video games because I knew how to dissect the things in front of me to make better decisions, innately, without even really trying. And then it became easier to play the games, and then it became about getting the muscle memory down, which is much easier than reaching an understanding of a system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something to be said there that, like, there is value in an understanding what's happening under the hood. Like, don't get me wrong, if you're broke down on the side of the road and you pop the hood and you just know, damn, my car burns oil, I need to put oil in, I know dippy sticky thingy, come out, I put oil in, that's it. But you can maybe diagnose more problems and be a little more confident in your car if you not only open the hood and go, I don't know, it's metal junk, but you start to recognize some of the big pieces that are in there. You can recognize that's a battery. You can recognize that's an alternator. You can recognize that's the engine. You can recognize that's where the coolant is stored. And so if anything happens in the future, you're just going to be better able to maybe figure out what might have gone wrong if you know what the basic components are.
Yeah.
You still aren't, it doesn't make you a mechanic, but it helps. And I find that for games, it's the same way. Mm-hmm. You understand weapon strength in Wargames, you understand weapon damages and armor pen and mitigation and stuff in shooters. Like, they're not all that different from each other. There's probably way more options in a video game. That's okay. You can figure them out. You've got the tools. And I think it helps you get some mastery behind it, which adds another layer of enjoyment to the video games. At least it does for me. And it's just sort of an inherent thing of, I like the feel of my own improvement from effort and understanding.
And I think Joe referenced it towards the beginning of the episode. And I think we're going to end here talking about the final point. And for me, what I think is the most important point, and ultimately what this does the most of, which is it allows you to lessen, like playing other games. It doesn't just have to be war games. We're using it as the example, but tabletop RPGs, going out and maybe finding a LARP group, doing any sort of outside gaming besides just video games, allows you to lessen the expectation on games and where you're getting your enrichment from. And you could even do this by just reaching out to do more books, right? To do more things that aren't just playing video games. Because if you spend all of your free time and fun time just playing video games, you have now put the expectation on it that its experience must be stellar and out of the park at all times. But to use movies as an example, not every movie can be a knockout classic. Sometimes what you want to watch is garbage. I love the movie Armageddon. I think that movie's garbage. I will watch that movie when I want to have a good time.
I love the movie Deep Blue Sea. I think that movie, if I'm admitting it, is probably outright bad.
And
maybe terrible.
Why I enjoy that is because I have lower expectations for it. And I've gotten to that point with video games too, right? Not every video game for me has to hit the expectation of being a 100+ hour life-changing experience, right? Not every one of them has to be a video game that I think about forever. It can be a game that I play for a week or two, have a great time, and put down and go, that was neat.
I mean, it ain't Thomas Jane jumping off of a pier to try to deal with colossally mutated, hyper-intelligent Mako Blue Pointers, or LL Cool J trying to keep his parrot alive while getting hunted through the bowels of a research facility by said monstrous Mako Blue Pointers. But yeah, games are neat.
Sure.
We're going to go watch Deep Blue Sea after this.
Clearly. I don't get a choice. He's going to make me. He's going to drive to my house, drag me by like a scruff of my neck to watch Deep Blue Sea.
Yes.
But, I mean, it's a thing me and Joe have discussed multiple times. Is this, like, when we put less expectation on a game, and to be the thing that makes me feel enriched, it just ends up being more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think this is true in a lot of people's aspects of their life. You know, if you put all of the pressure of your enjoyment or your relief or your release on one thing, that's a lot to ask of something, especially if you have a limited budget. So, for example, maybe you can't buy a ton of new games. If your only enjoyment, your only hobby is playing the video games, and you only have the budget to buy one video game for the next month, holy crap, that game has to be incredible. If it's got to be hugely long, it's got to be a banger story, It's got to be replayable. And if it's not, you're in for a bad time. And I think you set yourself up for failure in doing that. You set yourself up for disappointment and discomfort, and like games or stories that you otherwise could have enjoyed with your friends or even on your own will be sort of spoiled or poisoned for you in a way that doesn't have to be. And I just think that's a damn shame.
And sometimes there's not new video games coming out that you're going to be interested in. And if you're expecting every month to have a new video game to be interested in, that you have to keep your enjoyment up, and you can't just take a break from video games for a couple of weeks, couple of months, until you wait for a cool thing to come out, you have a hard time. I was playing very little, if any, video games before Space Marine 2 came out. Even like Helldivers and stuff. Like I would play like every once in a while, like once or twice every couple of weeks for like 20 minutes. It wasn't nearly as much as when Space Marine 2 came out and we did nothing else for a week.
I mean, that's true. We played a lot of it.
We had a great time. It was wonderful.
So great.
We've chilled out a little bit now, but like, I don't think we would have had that same level of enjoyment if we wouldn't have been like, if we would have gone from nonstop playing like a new World of Warcraft expansion into Space Marine 2.
Yeah. We'd go, wow, this not nearly enough content, terrible value for dollar.
Yeah.
We'd have been a very different YouTube channel. I think there is, I don't know, the more things you could do to give yourself fun is good to pursue. And I really hope that this is a way to do that for people.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause for me, it's been massively helpful. You know, like I would, especially because like a lot of money stress in my life history, like I would play a game and I would feel myself as the story was progressing and I was enjoying it and like the climax was coming up, like you could just sort of feel the momentum. I would feel myself going, oh no, is this going to end soon? What am I going to do? I don't want it to be over. And some of that was because I didn't feel like I got enough dollar for my money. But I think also part of that is because I knew like, oh man, when like credits roll, what else do I have to do? And sometimes the answer was nothing. And it created pressure. It created sadness that was like manufactured by me. And it is only since I have sort of inadvertently now got other things that I enjoy doing, other hobbies, friends who I try to get together with for no reason other than to just hang out and enjoy each other's company. Those thoughts are easier for me to get rid of and to keep from spoiling or poisoning great experience. You know, if a story's feeling incredible and my brain tries to go, oh, it's almost done. Yeah, that's great. I hope it ends with a banger. Rather than, oh, I hope it drags on a little more.
Yeah, you just enjoy the journey and you're excited for it to be over because you want to see how it ends instead of going, but like I can do that. I spent $60 on this journey and I have only gotten 20 hours out of this journey. Where's my other 40 hours of journey?
No, it's fine. I hope this ending comes crashing in. I hope it wrecks me emotionally. It's gonna be incredible. And I hope I think about it for years. Like, it fundamentally, at least for me, has changed my relationship with games. And when I come back, I take my time, I appreciate them more, and some of them I truly, like, have found a way to love again. And I hope that this, if it's doesn't work for you one-to-one, I hope out there, like, listeners, that maybe it starts you to ask these questions and maybe find your own way back to that. To get more enjoyment from things that you used to really, really yearn for, and maybe that has lessened.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, why the hell else are we here doing this stuff, if not to have a good time? It was, at least for me, it's been a great way to enjoy what I'm doing and to not just devour game after game after game after game without even remembering them or paying attention to them. And I think there's probably like a much bigger philosophical concept there that we're like kind of circling the drain on, but I'm not nearly educated enough to get.
Yeah, we're fine. We could spend 4 hours talking about this. I just don't think people want that. So
I'd have to go put on like a button-up shirt or something. Like, no one wants to hear that
so-
conversation with our. Well, I don't think I have a big accent, but like accents.
Yeah, if you want me to pretend to be Jordan Peterson and him to pretend to be Joe Rogan for like 4 hours talking about the correlation between these two things, we'll do that. But you need to let us know that you want it down in the comments below.
Oh my god!
I can't guarantee it's going to happen. We'll at least consider it.
I'm gonna need so much freaking elk meat. Holy god! Well, I don't even have elk here to hunt.
Sorry, I don't make the rules. You're Joe Rogan with hair now. I don't know how to make this any easier for you.
God, John. We will be cooking up other episode ideas. Probably around Conquest, if I'm being honest. That'll be coming out soon. But we wanted to at least take this time to talk through our own thoughts and to pump the brakes, as we have said in this episode, and at least talk through what we've been having in our noodle. I hope it helps y'all. And I know we say it every time, but I mean it more than ever. If you have questions about this, if you have struggles, and you just like, you listen to this and you've realized like, oh, I want to do something about it, but really like, I don't even know where the hell to start. Reach out, put it in the comments, reach out on Instagram. Like I don't know if we can necessarily solve it, but we can maybe help you try, and happy to. That's the whole point of what we're doing here. And for now, that has been all of our opinions, bona fide, and Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all in the next one.